And what if, in a moment of desperation, you found a hope that could change everything? This is the reality for Ethan, a little boy of only 6 years old living in a world that seems to be crumbling around him. He and his mother, Sarah, share a life marked by struggle and pain, as Sarah, after a severe accident, finds herself confined to a wheelchair, battling an illness that slowly consumes her. Ethan, with a pure heart and admirable determination, decides he cannot stand still. He believes that if he can raise enough money for his mother's surgery, he can save her. Thus, he finds himself begging on the streets, facing not only the indifferent gazes of strangers but also the shame that comes from his situation. The city, with its bustling streets and tall buildings, becomes a battleground for Ethan. He encounters indifferent looks and cruel comments, but that does not make him give up. The desire to save Sarah is what drives him to keep going, even when everything seems to be against him. Amid these challenges, Ethan finds an unexpected ally, George, an elderly janitor who, upon seeing the boy posting his flyers in search of help, decides to get involved. George not only helps Ethan redo his flyers but also offers him words of encouragement, becoming a father figure amidst the chaos. One morning, while putting up a new flyer near a splendid mansion, Ethan spots a woman who leaves him perplexed. She looks exactly like his mother. His mind, filled with hope and confusion, races with the possibility that Sarah has recovered and found a new home amidst the wealth. However, as he approaches, he realizes that the woman, named Isabel, is a stranger, although she appears to be a reflection of Sarah. The story unfolds as Ethan decides to take Isabel to meet his true mother, creating a connection that will change their lives forever. When the two women finally meet, a surprising revelation occurs. They are identical twins, separated at birth. Isabel, touched by Ethan and Sarah's story, promises to help her sister recover by organizing the surgery that could save her life. Meanwhile, George, who grows increasingly close to Ethan, makes a discovery that connects him even more to the family. He reveals that he is the boy's grandfather, a connection that brings forth memories of the past and unexpected reconciliations. Thus, the narrative unfolds in a setting where love, overcoming adversity, and family reconnection intertwine. Ethan, with his hopes and dreams, finds himself surrounded by people who truly care. The story culminates in an emotional family reunion where Sarah, finally recovered, and George, once lonely, meet for a new beginning. Life for Ethan, marked by challenges, now shines with the promise of a future filled with love and unity. Ethan felt a weight on his small shoulders as he walked the streets of the city. Each indifferent gaze, each sarcastic murmur, made his heart ache. He knew his mission was noble, but the stark reality of life on the streets was a constant challenge. The small change he managed to collect was just a pale reflection of what was truly needed for his mother's surgery, and with each passing day, hope seemed to slip through his fingers. George, the janitor, had become his confidant. He always had a story to tell, something that made Ethan smile, even in the darkest moments. But George also had his own battles. After losing his wife years ago, he felt alone and without purpose. Seeing Ethan's struggle reignited a spark of hope in his heart. He wanted to help the boy, even if it meant putting aside his own pain. That morning, while putting up another flyer in search of donations, Ethan spotted Isabel. The resemblance to his mother was striking, and the boy couldn't help the hope that grew inside him. When their eyes met, an inexplicable connection seemed to emerge. However, reality began to impose itself quickly. As he approached, Ethan grew nervous. What would he say? How could she help? The tension rose in his chest, mixing expectation and fear. Ethan took Isabel home, where his mother awaited him, unaware that her life was about to change. Sarah, upon seeing the woman who looked like her, fell silent, her eyes wide with surprise. The moment was magical, but also filled with uncertainties. The revelation that they were twins brought tears to Sarah's eyes, but also an immense weight. How had they lost each other? And more importantly, how could they recover the lost time? Isabel, upon hearing about Sarah's struggle, felt her heart tighten. She had a comfortable life, but what was the value of it if she couldn't help her sister? Determination grew within her, but so did a sense of guilt. What if she had done something differently in the past? What if she had searched for Sarah? These questions tormented her as she tried to find a way to support her sister. Meanwhile, Ethan watched from afar, as if he were in a movie. He wanted everything to work out, but doubt began to creep into his mind. What if Isabel couldn't help? What if the surgery never happened? The pressure on his small shoulders grew, and he wondered if he had enough strength to face yet another obstacle. George, who always observed the dynamics of the new family, felt conflicted. He wanted to support Ethan, but he also had his own memories, and the revelation that he was the boy's grandfather left him stunned. What should he do? How could he reconnect with the family he had never known? Tension heightened as Sarah began to recover, but she soon realized that the journey would be longer than she had expected. The fight for health was not only physical but emotional. She found herself caught between the hope of a new sister and the sadness of everything she had lost. The connection with Isabel brought joy, but also a lingering pain, a constant reminder of what fate had imposed on them. Ethan, for his part, was at a critical moment. He wanted to be strong, but the pressure to be the man of the house was consuming him. When things didn't go as planned, he felt like he was failing. The boy began to question whether he could bear the burden he had taken on. The thought that his mother might never recover terrified him. What would happen to them if everything fell apart again? The difficulties began to pile up, and each new day brought a different challenge. Ethan watched his mother fight against the pain, while Isabel tried to find ways to raise funds for the surgery. The feeling of helplessness was overwhelming. Even with George's support, Ethan realized that, at times, loneliness could be devastating. He wanted to be the reason for his mother's happiness, but the reality was that he was just a child. The friendship between Ethan and George deepened, but not without complications. George, who was beginning to see Ethan as his grandson, worried about the weight the boy carried. He wanted Ethan to know that he wasn't alone, but how could he convey that without seeming to take the boy's strength away? The road ahead was filled with uncertainties and challenges, and Ethan knew he would need to face his fears. The fight for his mother's health had become a battle not only against the illness but also against his own insecurities. Deep down, he wondered if he could find the strength needed to keep fighting, even when everything seemed lost. While Ethan tried to keep hope alive, things began to unravel. He couldn't raise enough money for his mother's surgery. The donations he received were getting smaller and the indifferent glances became more frequent. Frustration and helplessness took over his days, and the boy found himself in a tide of despair. He wondered if he would find a way to overcome this dark phase, but doubt settled in like a weight on his heart. Isabel, for her part, was also facing her own challenges. Although she had a comfortable life, the guilt of not having met Sarah sooner tormented her. She decided that, in addition to helping her sister, she needed to find a way to connect with the past she had lost. Isabel began organizing events to raise funds, but soon realized that the task was harder than she had imagined. People were busy, and the lack of interest discouraged her. The feeling of frustration built up, and in moments of despair, she wondered if she could really make a difference in Sarah's life. George, always observant, noticed the growing tension between the two sisters and the burden that Ethan was carrying. He wanted to help but felt powerless. The caretaker often remembered his own loneliness and how life had left him behind. He decided that he needed to take action. One day, after a frustrating fundraising event organized by Isabel that yielded no significant results, George approached her. "Isabel, I see the struggle that you and Ethan are facing. I know you want to help, but maybe it's time to think of a new plan. People need to see the story behind this, the connection between you. It could touch their hearts," he suggested, with the wisdom he had gained over the years. The conversation ignited a spark of hope in Isabel. She realized that their story was powerful and could inspire people to come together for the cause. Together, they decided to create a video that told the story of Sarah and Ethan, showcasing the struggle and strength of their family connection. Meanwhile, Ethan was trapped in his own spiral of despair. He felt as if he were failing, as if he couldn't do enough to save his mother. One night, after a particularly difficult day, he went out to walk the streets, trying to find some clarity. Loneliness enveloped him, and he began to cry. The weight he carried felt unbearable. He questioned himself, "Why can't I do this? Why is everything so hard?" It was at that moment that the connection with Isabel and George became vital. Upon returning home, he found the video that Isabel had recorded and edited. As he watched, Ethan felt something shift within him. He saw his mother's strength, Isabel's determination, and the hope they could generate together. Tears gave way to a faint smile. He realized he was not alone in this fight. There were people willing to fight alongside him. However, as things seemed to stabilize, Ethan faced a new disappointment. One of the events organized by Isabel did not have the expected turnout, and the money raised fell far short of what was needed. Frustration returned with full force, and Ethan felt more lost than ever. He began to question whether the effort was worth it and if he could truly make a difference in his mother's life. Insecurity and doubt were becoming constant companions. George noticed Ethan's discouragement and decided it was time to act. He sat down with the boy and shared his own stories of struggle and loss. With simple words, George spoke about the importance of not giving up, even when everything seems bleak. Sometimes, life gives us challenges that seem too big, but it is in the small steps that we find the strength to keep going. You may not see it now, but every effort counts, every gesture of love makes a difference, he said with an encouraging smile. These words resonated with Ethan. He began to understand that, even in the face of failures, the important thing was to keep trying. His mother's journey was not just about the surgery, but about the struggle and the strength they could find together as a family. The connection with Isabel and George had become a true foundation, and he decided that he could not give up. As the days passed, Ethan's determination renewed. He started to engage more actively in Isabel's initiatives, and together they sought new ways to raise money. Their friendship grew stronger, and the idea that each challenge could be overcome, even in small steps, began to form a new perspective in Ethan. He was no longer alone, and perhaps, together, they could really make a difference. Ethan felt that life was about to test his strengths in a way he had never imagined. He and Isabel were determined to continue their fight, but the pressure was mounting. After several failed fundraising attempts, a new idea emerged: a large community bazaar. They were excited about the possibility of involving more people and perhaps gaining the support they so desperately needed. With George's help, they began to plan the event. Weeks passed, and the energy was high. The bazaar was promoted on social media, posters were spread throughout the city, and Ethan felt hopeful again. He remembered George's words, "Every small step counts." But behind this optimism, a shadow of anxiety grew in his heart. He couldn't shake the feeling that if everything went wrong again, there would be no turning back. On the day of the bazaar, the town was filled with people. The atmosphere was festive, with laughter and conversations echoing throughout the square. Ethan helped set up the booths and organize the items that would be sold. However, as the hours went by, the number of people was not as large as they had expected. Ethan began to feel a tightening in his chest. He looked at Isabel, who was trying to keep smiling, but her frustration was evident. As the sun began to set, the hope of raising the necessary funds for his mother's surgery seemed further away. Ethan gathered his courage and approached Isabel. "Everything is okay, right? We're going to make it, aren't we?" He wanted to believe in her optimistic response, but uncertainty hung in the air. However, what happened next was something Ethan never expected. An elderly woman, who seemed to have come from a distant place, approached their booth. With a gentle look, she began to examine the items for sale. Ethan, nervous, tried to sell a small decorative object, but the woman simply smiled and began to share a story about her own struggle with an illness, similar to Sarah's. The emotional connection was instant. The woman shared how she had overcome difficult times with the help of her family and friends. As she spoke, Ethan felt his heart tighten. He realized that he was not alone in his struggle. The woman's story reflected pain, but also the strength he had been searching for. After a few words, she reached into her small bag and, with a determined look, made a generous donation. The woman left not only a financial impact but also an emotional one. Ethan felt that his own struggle was not isolated and that there was a network of people willing to support one another. This moment of connection made him reconsider his choices and how he viewed life. He realized that true strength was not just in raising money, but in creating bonds, in touching people's hearts with his story. Inspired, Ethan turned to Isabel and George, who were watching the scene with shining eyes. He realized that the event was not just about fundraising, but about building a community. The failures of the past were not barriers, but opportunities to learn and grow. As the bazaar continued, Ethan began to get more involved. He talked to people, shared his story, and listened to theirs. Each interaction was like a small light in the darkness. The atmosphere that had once felt heavy was now filled with hope and solidarity. The event turned into a celebration of human resilience. As the day went on, the flow of donations began to increase. The energy Ethan had felt before was back, but now it was deeper. He understood that even if he couldn't reach the total amount needed, he was already making a difference in a way he had never imagined. At the end of the bazaar, when the lights began to dim, Ethan felt a wave of emotion. He had not only raised a significant amount, but he had also found a new purpose. He realized that success was not just about measuring money, but about the ability to touch lives and unite people around a greater cause. That night, as he returned home, Ethan reflected on everything he had learned. He finally understood that despite the difficulties, true strength lay in not giving up and in staying connected with those he loved. He was no longer just a boy fighting to save his mother. He was part of something bigger, a community that supported one another. And so, with a new understanding, Ethan decided that he would continue to fight, not just for his mother, but for everyone facing similar battles. He was ready for whatever came next, knowing he was not alone on his journey. Ethan returned home that night with a lighter heart. The bazaar had been an unexpected success, not only in terms of fundraising but also in terms of connection. However, as the adrenaline of excitement began to fade, he found himself confronted with a new reality. The fight for his mother was not yet over, and he was aware that challenges would continue to arise. In the days that followed, the positive energy from the bazaar began to dissipate. Ethan realized that despite the support from the community, there was still the constant pressure to raise more money for the surgery. He started to feel anxious again. The donations that had come in were significant but not enough to cover all the expenses. He would need more events, more ideas, more time. The weight of this responsibility was increasing, and he feared that what he had achieved was insufficient. Isabel noticed the change in Ethan's behavior. While he struggled to keep hope alive, she saw the insecurity in his eyes. One night, while they were at home, she decided to approach him. "Ethan, are you feeling okay? It seems like the pressure is consuming you," she asked, concerned. He hesitated but eventually opened up. "I feel like I'm not doing enough. The bazaar was amazing, but we're still so far from what we need. I don't know how I'm going to make it," he vented. Frustration was evident in his voice. Isabel, always optimistic, tried to encourage him. "We've accomplished so much so far. Did you see how many people joined us? This is just the beginning. We can do more events, maybe a charity run or a bingo night. People want to help, Ethan. You just need to believe that you can keep going." The conversation calmed Ethan's heart a bit, but uncertainty still lingered. He began to plan new events, but the pressure for everything to go right felt overwhelming. Each idea that popped into his mind came with doubts. What if it doesn't work? What if people don't care as much next time? The fear of failing again was a burden he didn't know how to carry. Meanwhile, George, who had always been a source of support, noticed the change in Ethan. One afternoon, as they organized the next meeting to discuss new ideas, he decided to intervene. "Ethan, you know you don't have to carry all this alone. We're all here for you and your mother. The community has come together, and that's something we can't forget. Don't focus only on the financial goal. Look at what we've already achieved." These words resonated in Ethan's mind. He began to realize that his fight was not just for his mother, but for all those who had joined him. He needed to change the way he viewed the situation. Instead of clinging to the pressure, he could focus on the connections he had made and the support they were receiving. But this transition was not easy. In this new state of mind, Ethan decided he would need moments of introspection to deal with his emotions. He started walking every day after school, seeking time to reflect. During these walks, he encountered familiar faces in the community, friends, neighbors, and even that same group of people who had attended the bazaar. Each smile and wave reminded him that he was not alone. One day, while walking, Ethan came across the elderly woman who had made a generous donation at the bazaar. She was sitting on a bench, watching the activity in the square. Ethan hesitated but decided to approach her. "Hi, I'm Ethan. Do you remember me?" The woman smiled warmly. "Of course I remember, dear. You and your friend did a wonderful job at the bazaar." The conversation flowed naturally. Ethan shared his concerns, and the woman, with quiet wisdom, offered advice. Sometimes, when we're so focused on a goal, we forget to appreciate the small victories. Don't underestimate the impact you've already had on people's lives, including your own. These words echoed in Ethan's mind. He began to understand that even though obstacles were still present, it was essential to celebrate every small step. The fight for his mother was just a part of something bigger, a movement of solidarity that involved many. With this new perspective, Ethan decided he would not give up. He and Isabel began planning a new event, but now with a different approach. Instead of just focusing on fundraising, they wanted to create a space where people could share their stories, celebrate their victories, and support one another. What once felt like a heavy burden was now transforming into a collective effort. As he walked back home, Ethan felt a renewed sense of hope. He knew there was still much work ahead, but he had also discovered that true strength lay in human connection. With that, he was ready to face whatever came next, not just for his mother, but for all those in need of support. Ethan walked through the city streets, the cool afternoon breeze tousling his hair. There was a new spark in his eyes, a flame of hope propelling him forward. After heartfelt conversations with Isabel and the elderly woman in the park, he began to realize that his journey was not just about raising money for his mother's surgery, but about building a genuine support network where each person played an important role. In the days that followed, the idea of hosting a community event that celebrated stories of overcoming began to take shape in his mind. He wanted to create a space where people could share not only their struggles but also their triumphs. Ethan knew that many in the community faced challenges similar to his, and he wanted everyone to feel welcomed and heard. He gathered with Isabel and George to discuss the new idea. What if we did an event focused on life stories? Something that connects people and doesn't just raise money, he suggested, excitement filling his voice. Isabel smiled, seeing the transformation in her friend. George nodded in agreement, supporting the idea. With everyone's help, Ethan began to plan the event. He made posters, talked to neighbors, and even organized small meetings for people to share their experiences. With each step, he felt he was building something larger than himself. The anxiety that had previously overwhelmed him began to dissipate. He realized he was not alone on this journey. There was an entire community willing to walk alongside him. In the week leading up to the event, the energy was palpable. People began to arrive, and Ethan felt a mix of nerves and excitement. He saw familiar faces, childhood friends, neighbors, and even strangers who had joined them. When he finally began to speak, his voice trembled, but he allowed himself to be carried away by the emotion of the moment. He opened up about his own struggles, about his mother's health, and how each person there had contributed to making him feel stronger. Around him, people began to share their stories. A woman spoke about her battle with depression, a man recounted how he overcame the loss of a child, and a young person revealed how the community helped him find his way after being rejected by his family. Tears flowed and smiles spread. Ethan realized that these experiences were far more valuable than any amount of money. He felt he was building a bond, a connection that transcended individual hardships. After the event, while helping to tidy up, Ethan was approached by an older man who had heard his story. He told Ethan he was a special young man, emphasizing that what he had done that day was not just about money. He had brought people together, and that was what truly mattered. That statement resonated deeply with Ethan. He understood that success was not measured solely in numbers, but in human connections and the ability to inspire one another. From that moment on, Ethan began to apply the lessons he had learned. He became more open to accepting help and collaborating with others. With the community by his side, he felt empowered. He started to look at challenges differently. Each obstacle that appeared in his path was not a barrier but an opportunity to grow and learn. The following months were marked by new events, each more successful than the last, but now the emphasis was on unity and solidarity. Ethan realized that his personal struggle had transformed into a collective mission. He began to see life in a new way, understanding that everyone has their battles and that true wealth lies in how we support one another. Thus, Ethan not only fought for his mother's health but also became a catalyst for change in the community. He developed deep and unusual friendships, learning from each person's life stories. Over time, he became a symbol of resilience and hope, showing that even in adversity, human connection is what truly matters. And so, Ethan's journey turned into a story of overcoming, growth, and love. On the morning of his mother's surgery, Ethan woke up with a heavy heart. He had done everything he could, from organizing events to creating a support network, but he still felt the weight of responsibility was greater than he could bear. The surgery was a crucial step, yet the uncertainty about the outcome left him anxious. He looked in the mirror and saw a young man who had changed a lot in the past few months but still struggled with his insecurities. The hours that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. Ethan and his mother were at the hospital, surrounded by doctors and nurses. He held her hand, trying to convey strength and courage, but inside, he felt fragile. The waiting room was full of people, each with their own stories and worries. He realized that despite his personal pain, there was a much larger world around him, filled with challenges and battles that others faced. When the doctors finally came out, Ethan felt his heart stop for a moment. The surgeon approached with a serious yet gentle expression. He informed Ethan that the surgery had been successful, but his mother would need care and support to recover. Relief and gratitude spilled from Ethan's lips, but the euphoria was quickly replaced by concern. The recovery would require time and dedication, and he knew he couldn't face it alone. However, he was no longer alone. With the support of the community he had built, Ethan decided that his mother's recovery journey would be a collective effort. He started calling friends and neighbors, asking for help. He explained they needed cooks, people who could keep her company, and even someone to help with shopping. His voice was filled with determination. The response was immediate. People offered to bring meals, keep her company, and even help with household chores. The unity he had fostered was now becoming a fundamental pillar in his life. In the following days, as his mother recovered, Ethan realized the true value of friendship and mutual support. He was surrounded by people who genuinely cared for him and his family. Each visit, every meal brought, and every word of encouragement contributed to the emotional healing they were experiencing together. He remembered the stories shared at the event, reflecting on how each tale of overcoming had intertwined with his own journey. There was one particular day that stood out in Ethan's memory. He came home after another day at the hospital to find the living room filled with friends and neighbors. They had gathered to hold an impromptu celebration in honor of his mother. She was seated in a chair, smiling, surrounded by familiar faces. The energy was contagious. There were laughs, music, and above all, love. Ethan looked around and felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The struggle he had faced had transformed into a journey of connection and solidarity. He remembered the words of the older man who had approached him after the event. It was true, what truly mattered was human connection, and he had built something much greater than any amount of money. As everyone sang a song his mother loved, Ethan felt a wave of gratitude. He realized that true wealth was not in the amount of money he had raised, but in the friendships he had cultivated and the lessons he had learned. He had overcome his challenges, discovering his inner strength, and more importantly, he had become a facilitator of hope and support for others. At that moment, his heart was full. He knew that his mother's recovery would still take time, but now he did not fear the challenges that lay ahead. He was ready to face them, not just for his mother, but for all those who had joined him on this journey. Ethan had found his purpose, to build a united community where life's stories intertwined and where everyone had a special place. And so, Ethan's transformation solidified. He was no longer just a young man fighting for his mother. He was a symbol of resilience and love, proving that even in the toughest moments, friendship and unity could light the way. He finally understood that true success was not just about winning, but about who you become along the way and how you bring others with you. Ethan watched his mother, now stronger, surrounded by friends and neighbors who had gathered to celebrate her recovery. He realized that the room was filled with love and support, and this made him reflect on everything that had happened in the past months. The weight of his responsibility still existed, but now it was shared among all those who cared. He smiled, feeling warmth in his heart. After the party, as the guests were leaving, Ethan sat beside his mother. She looked at him with gratitude in her eyes. "You did an amazing job, my son. I never imagined so many people cared so much," she said, stroking his hand. Ethan felt that her words were a recognition of what he had fought to achieve. He had always thought he had to be strong for himself and for her, but now he understood that strength also lay in accepting help. "I learned that we don't have to face everything alone," Ethan replied, his voice filled with emotion. "People want to help, and I was so focused on doing everything by myself that I didn't realize that before." His mother nodded, a comforting smile on her face. "It's true, dear. Sometimes, the greatest courage is in asking for help." This moment of reflection made Ethan realize that he had changed. He was no longer the insecure young man who hesitated to ask for support. He now saw the value of community and how unity could make a difference. In the days that followed, Ethan devoted himself to caring for his mother, but now with the help of friends and neighbors. He organized shifts so that there was always someone nearby, and this brought a new dynamic to the house. There were laughter, conversations, and even moments of relaxation that had previously seemed impossible. Friends brought not only meals but also joy and lightness, helping everyone cope with the stress of recovery. One day, while he and his mother were sitting on the porch, she commented, "Did you know that many of our neighbors are incredible people? I never had the chance to get to know them so well before." Ethan smiled, realizing that the difficult situation had opened doors for new friendships. He felt grateful to have fostered this connection. "Yes, and I think this is just the beginning. I want to keep doing this, helping to bring people together," Ethan said. He was determined to turn the experience he had lived into something positive, something that could benefit the community. During a dinner at home, one of the neighbors brought up an idea. "What if we organized a community event? Something that brings everyone together and celebrates the unity you created." Ethan loved the idea. He realized he could use his mother's experience to help others who were going through difficult times. With everyone's support, they began to plan a day of activities, with music, food, and stories of overcoming challenges. Ethan was excited but also nervous. What if people didn't show up? What if he failed again? But looking at his mother, he remembered all that he had achieved so far and how every small step counted. He decided that, regardless of the outcome, the important thing was to try. On the day of the event, a crowd gathered. Ethan was moved to see so many people, including those who had helped during his mother's recovery. He stepped onto the stage and, with a trembling voice, began to speak. "I am here today because I learned that together we are stronger. This community supported me when I needed it most, and now I want us all to support one another." There were applause and smiles around him, and he felt that his message was being heard. At the end of the day, as people danced and enjoyed themselves, Ethan realized that his journey was not just about his mother, but about all those who had come together to create something greater. He saw families connecting, laughter being shared, and hearts opening. The happiness that filled the air was palpable. Ethan realized that by facing his fears and insecurities, he had become a catalyst for change. He not only helped his mother recover, but he also helped build a caring community. He smiled to himself, feeling that he had found his place in the world. His life's journey had changed forever, and he was ready to face whatever came next, knowing he would never be alone. Ethan observed the joy around him, feeling a wave of gratitude flood his heart. The community event had become a true success, surpassing all his expectations. He saw people dancing, laughing, and sharing stories, which made him reflect on everything he had faced. He realized that his journey of overcoming was not just about his mother's recovery, but about the connection he had helped to create among people. In the months that followed, life in the community continued to flourish. The friendships Ethan cultivated grew deeper, and he became a pillar of support for many. He recognized that there was beauty in vulnerability, and accepting help was not a sign of weakness, but a demonstration of strength. With each new challenge, he remembered the lessons he had learned, that true strength lies in unity and the ability to open up to others. The relationship between Ethan and his mother also transformed. They became closer, sharing laughter and heartfelt conversations. The gratitude she felt for his dedication was reflected in every gesture and word. Ethan now saw his mother not just as someone who needed care, but as a partner in his life journey. Together, they discovered the resilience that existed within them, which brought them even closer. Ethan realized that success was not in individual achievements, but in how he could impact the lives of others. He became an advocate for the community, encouraging gatherings and activities that promoted solidarity. He learned that true wealth was not measured in material possessions, but in the love and connections we cultivate throughout our lives. On a sunny day, while walking through the park with his mother, Ethan remembered how it all began. He looked at her, now full of life and energy, and smiled. "Mom, do you remember how everything seemed so bleak before? Look at us now." She smiled back, her eyes shining with pride. "Yes, my son. This is all a result of your generous heart and your courage. You really made a difference." Ethan felt a warmth in his chest, knowing he had found his purpose. He had learned that life is made up of ups and downs, but each challenge brings an opportunity to grow and connect with others. He was ready to face whatever came next, with the assurance that he would never be alone. Ethan's story is a powerful reminder that even in the hardest moments, there is always a light at the end of the tunnel. He encouraged everyone around him to come together, support each other, and face life together. Now, he invites you to reflect. How can you connect more with the people around you? What actions can you take to build a stronger and more supportive community? Share your experiences and thoughts in the comments. Remember that every interaction helps to spread messages of hope and unity. If you felt inspired by Ethan's journey, like this video and subscribe to the channel. Together, we can create a space where stories of overcoming and friendship become the norm. This is the time to act and be part of this transformation.